Joining us now to break down the impact, editor-in-chief of The Verge and CNBC contributor Nilay Patel. Nilay, good to see you. Put this in context for us. We are always talking about antitrust, penalties, rulings. However, it never seems to be in focus for investors, at least, as we continue to see big tech, Apple included, hit all-time highs.
Yeah, I think the quote that I keep thinking about here is the famous Jeff Bezos line, "Your margin is my opportunity." This margin for Apple and Google is huge. It's been driving both these companies for years and years now. And that margin is going to start getting redistributed back to app companies and app vendors who are going to be able to take some of that 30% that they've been paying to Apple, put it back into their own products, potentially back to their investors. I think that's a huge deal. I think this South Korean regulation is just the first we're going to see worldwide. And I think a lot of countries are going to see how it plays out before taking similar action.
And what about here in the U.S., Nilay? How closely are they watching? And I know that there is something similar being considered over here. So you think that this is sort of just the first step? We're going to see a domino effect from here on out.
Oh, I think this 30% rate for both these companies is dead in the water around the world. I think here in the U.S., it depends on how a lot of things go. There's a lot of dominoes. I don't know what order they're going to be in. There's the Epic trial against Apple, which is going to come to a verdict soon. That will obviously get appealed in either direction. There's also the case against Google from Epic, which the complaint was unsealed. We've learned a lot about how Google manages the Play Store. At one point, they were even considering buying Epic to shut down this competition. As more and more of that evidence comes to light, the regulators in the United States are taking a hard look, and there are those bills in Congress. They seem like they're moving along slowly. There's quite a lot happening otherwise to distract our government right now. But those bills are on track. So I don't know in what order a verdict, the Google lawsuit, congressional action is going to take place, but it's happening. And I think fundamentally this is good for these companies themselves. It's good for Apple and Google because the way for them to win is to start to compete again, providing services to developers.
It's so interesting, Nilay, as we wait for these dominoes to fall, as you put it, and one of those bills in Congress, one of those bipartisan bills, does have a lot of the pieces that this South Korean law has. And I think it's worth noting that that is in play here. When you say this is going to help Apple and Google, I'm wondering what you mean by that in terms of competition and how you see them reacting, maybe proactively as they await more of those dominoes to fall. We saw Apple do the settlement in the class action suit last week. Do you expect Apple and Google to make more concessions ahead of more legislative action?
I don't know if that settlement was a concession at all, but I do think it's emblematic of the steps Apple thinks it can take versus the steps it should take. So Apple put out a press release, said they're settling this lawsuit. They paid, all the lawyers got paid. Lawyers are very good at getting paid. App developers got fundamentally nothing. And I think you're seeing with developers in particular just a rising swell of antipathy towards Apple, towards Google. If these companies don't have great developers who want to build great experiences for their apps, these phones effectively just turn into shopping malls. And I think a big question for all of us is whether we want to have our own computers or someone else's shopping malls. And for Apple to maintain its brand image, to maintain that pride of place in the American tech ecosystem, I think they have to make sure developers are on their side. And the way to do that is to be pushed into competing.
Neil, flip side of this, I mean, it's interesting. It's decade 2 of these app stores. And, it was great for the first decade. Everybody was excited. Now they're like, wait a minute, a little bit much control and take from the operators here. But the flip side of this is that in a lot of ways, these app stores are working better than the PC equivalent in software distribution, which was all kinds of buggy and unsafe. So do these companies have enough different options, and I mean Apple and Google specifically, of levers to pull in order to maintain enough influence over their ecosystems to build and build profitably from here?
Yeah, I think they do. The one argument that never resonates with me from big tech companies is when they tell me they're not smart enough to figure something out. I think they're smart enough to figure it out. They figured it out on the Mac. They figured it out on Windows to a large extent, actually. They figured it out on Android, which does support additional app stores and sideloading of third-party binaries. There's a lot of ways to maintain the security while providing things as simple as third-party payment options. And I think here the thing that has happened is Apple and Google haven't budged at all. And because they haven't moved at all, you're now facing the prospect of pretty heavy-handed regulation.